fake news is a term that we hear thrown around a lot, and it's been a constant occurrence for the last few years at least. So some people use fake news as a way to label anything that they don't agree with, and in some cases, fake news actually means, hey, it's made up. But either way you slice it, fake news matters, and it's something that we all need to be aware of as consumers of information. So, as students, you're also consumers of information. You write papers, sometimes a lot of them, and that means that you look for information, you read it, you watch it, you listen to it. In other words, you take it in, you think about it, you consume it. So, in terms of why that matters to you, sure, you're writing papers, but a lot of you also vote or donate to charities or have social media accounts. And the sharing of fake news can influence how we vote or who we donate to or whether we keep someone as a friend on social media. So in terms of what this presentation does, is it's really going to talk about the types of fake news that are out there, describe them a little bit, and then give you some tools that you can use to analyze and evaluate things on your own. So when we ask ourselves, what is fake news? There are really four main categories. There's completely made up, absolutely fake content. There's authentic material that can be used either in the wrong context or without context. There's clickbait, where there's a catchy headline that once you click it, it doesn't really take you to a related article. And then there's parody and satire. But at the end of the day, fake news is a lot like a septic tank. It's really good at taking a lot of crap and making it look a little less like crap at the end. So here's our first example of completely fake made-up news. So this is taken from a now defunct website, but it looked almost exactly like the ABC News website, and you've got your really catchy headline. FBI agent suspected in Hillary email leaks found dead in apparent murder-suicide. You've got your picture that makes it just look terrible, and down below you've got a completely made-up article. Now, this never happened. The FBI agent was not murdered, but it was shared a lot because people who either disliked Hillary Clinton or thought she was a little slimy saw this and it confirmed their worst fears, and they started sharing it. But you gotta remember that at the end of the day, anybody, including me, can make fake news. All it takes is a catchy headline, a picture that kind of draws in the eye, and then by the time people start reading the article, if they get that far, they've already been drawn in by the headline and the picture. Now, you've also got things like clickbait, and almost all of us have seen examples of this, right? So you've got a title or a tagline or something that it gets your attention. So it can be something that makes you think, oh, man, I've got relatives that snore. Does this mean they're in danger of dying? Or there's the ever-popular, is your significant other cheating on you? Things that just make you feel like you have to click the link. But especially with things like the example that I've got on the left there, if you spend a little time looking at the image before you click it, like this thing is snoresolution.com. Chances are it's not really going to talk about how your aunt or your grandma or someone like that is going to drop over dead from snoring, but they needed a good tagline to get you to click on that link so they can try and sell you something. And then we've got satire or parody. Now, these things are actually designed for comedic value. So they're not real, they're not trying to look real, they're actually designed as comedy pieces. And The Onion is probably one of the oldest websites out there, but there are a lot of others. So the inherent danger here, again, is that people who, maybe they're really, really conservative, and they think, my God, of course the ACLU would actually think that it was a good idea to support Nazis' right to burn down their headquarters. Believe it or not, I actually saw people sharing this thinking it was real. So, satire and parody are great for a laugh, but only if you know that they're not real. So then we've got things that, as I said before, are lacking context. And what I mean by that is that on face value, maybe they're true, but just because they're true on face value doesn't mean that they're giving you the whole story. So I actually found this thing taped to a gas pump right before the 2012 election. And yes, when Obama took office in 2019, that was the price of a regular gallon of gas. And by the time of the 2012 election, gas was more expensive. That's true. The thing is that you can often debunk these things if you do just a little bit of digging. So, for example, the federal government keeps track of the price of gas. And I went ahead and looked at their endless spreadsheets of data, and the average price of gas in the last 2 years of George W. Bush's term and the first 2 years of President Obama's term were practically identical. So, you always want to keep in mind that just because a piece of paper or a picture says something, it's always worth doing a little bit of investigating and seeing if there's maybe a little more deeper truth hidden just behind the surface, because things like this look great at first glance, but this really has about as much depth to it as, say, a self-portrait of a 4-year-old. So, when we ask ourselves, why does fake news exist? Why is it shared? There are 2 main reasons. Number 1, influence. People want to change the minds of other people. And, for better or worse, that's a fact. The other reason is profit. And that can surprise a lot of people. But let me explain this part. So, let's say that I am the owner and creator of a fake news website. I've mastered the art of finding really catchy pictures, I've got super gripping headlines, and I know that people are going to start clicking and sharing those things, and visibility for my fake news site is just going to keep going up. Well, that means that it's going to get a lot of views and a lot of clicks. So that means that I'm going to start getting requests from people to say, how much would it cost us to put advertisements on your website? And of course I say, well, I'll be pretty reasonable. And by selling advertising space on my site, that's how I make money. And the more views and the more clicks that website makes, the more I'm going to make. So in some instances, right before the last presidential election, there were people in Eastern Europe creating fake news pages that were primarily being clicked on and shared in the United States, and they were making between $3,000 and $5,000 per month. So when we ask ourselves, is fake news actually a problem? The short answer is yes. In a pretty recent survey, about 2/3 of American adults said that they got at least some of their news from social media. And this can be Twitter, it can be Facebook, it can be pretty much any social media platform that's out there. The problem is that less than half of those people said that they were very confident that they could spot fake news. And almost a quarter of them admitted to sharing fake news, whether it was on purpose or not. So that means that there are a lot of people who are sharing fake news to other people that won't be able to spot it. And this is a chart that shows you social media engagement clicks, basically, on Facebook leading up to the last presidential election. And what's really startling here is that the black line on the left shows you mainstream news stories. So ABC, CBS, NBC, things like that. And then the red line are fake news articles. By the time of the election, fake news articles were actually getting more clicks than real news. And on the right, you can see the most shared fake news stories. So, in terms of how much of an impact did fake news have on the election, I don't have the answer, and I don't know that we're ever going to, but looking at this, it's pretty clear that the answer is not 0. So, in terms of what impact fake news can have on people and real-life events, here are a few examples. So, Shirley Sherrod was the Georgia State Director of Rural Development for the United States Department of Agriculture. That was a federal job. And she was responsible for basically helping poor farmers. So either keeping their property, finding ways to finance it, basically keeping farmers on their farms. And there had been a video interview of her that talked about basically her own personal development. You know, Shirley Sherrod was an African-American woman who grew up in the South, and she experienced a lot of discrimination and poor treatment. And in this video, she talked about basically having to overcome the treatment that she and her family had experienced and learning and valuing helping all poor people regardless of race. The problem is that an ultra-conservative website called Breitbart took that video, cut it down to much, much less than the full length, and selectively pieced things together to make it sound like she hated white people. And she was basically forced to resign, so more or less fired. And even though the full video was out there, there was so much outrage over the doctored clip that instead of her boss, instead of the federal government saying, whoa, slow down, let's watch the whole video first, they just demanded that she resign. And, you know, eventually there were apologies, but she said, you can keep your job, I'm not coming back. So that fake news can impact individuals dramatically. There was also a $130 million drop in the stock market when news broke that the White House had been bombed or there was an explosion there. There was no explosion. Again, fake news, pretty significant damage to the economy. When President Trump started criticizing Lockheed Martin on Twitter, their stock dropped. And basically saying, you know, the cost to build warplanes and Air Force One is completely ludicrous. Well, definitely it's high, but who knows how much technology goes into building things like that. The man opening fire in a pizza shop is known as Pizzagate. So the emails of the man that owned this pizza restaurant were hacked. And he had been a supporter and friend of Hillary Clinton. The problem is that when these emails were hacked and people started going through them, there were some conspiracy theorists out there that started being convinced that there was an underground sex trafficking ring in the basement of this pizza shop, specifically a child sex trafficking ring, and that they were using code words like cheese pizza for, like, young boy. Well, the thing is that if it's a pizza shop and they're sending emails, they're of course going to be talking about cheese pizzas. So you've got this armed guy forcing his way into the pizza place, demanding to investigate. The whole place has to be evacuated. It turns out there isn't even a basement in the place. But the fake news article and, you know, conspiracy theorists about what people thought was going on there could have gotten people shot. This Pepsi boycott example, a fake news story came out saying that the CEO of Pepsi said that Trump supporters should take their business elsewhere. She never said that, but because that headline went out, Trump supporters were planning to boycott Pepsi. And again, there's no concrete, demonstrable evidence of just how much fake news influenced the last election, but again, there was a lot of fake news, so we know that number isn't 0. So, how do you spot fake news? So, if you look at the left, I'm not going to go over everything on this list, but one of the most important things is read beyond the headline. In this day and age, a lot of us will read a headline and go, oh, that corresponds with what I believe. Share. We need to make sure that we're actually clicking the article and reading at least some of it to see, is it believable? Is it hyper-partisan? Is it balanced? You also want to consider the source. If it's a source that you know is super ultra-liberal or super ultra-conservative, chances are they're both going to be leaving out credible, pertinent information. And checking the date is really important too. I can tell you right now that I've started seeing a news story. The headline is something like, 10 police officers have died in the last week. And the thing is, it was from quite a while ago, but it's being shared again because all of these protests are happening right now. So if you share something that's completely out of date at the right time, it can give people the wrong idea. So the last thing is, check your biases. Just because a story agrees with what you're either personally believing, or if it corresponds with a paper that you're writing and it corresponds with your thesis, you need to make sure that it has, facts backing it up, whether that be verifiable quotes or statistics or something. It can't just say the right thing without being able to back it up. So I'll give you a couple examples here. If you look at the ABC News example at the top there, this looks exactly like the ABC News website did probably a year ago, and this one was Donald Trump protester speaks out. I was paid to protest Trump's rally. Now if you look at the URL, you're going to see abcnews.com, but then there's that .co after it. This was basically in another country, made to look like ABC News, so people that just glance at it are going to think it's credible, but it's completely made up. The example at the bottom, university will give black students free tuition as apology for slavery. But then if you read just a little bit more, Western Kentucky University's student government wants their school to pay reparations to black students for slavery. This is misrepresenting some stuff, because the student government at WKU did vote that they wanted the school to provide African American students with free tuition. Western Kentucky University didn't agree to it, as this headline says, but if you look at the bottom there, therightwingportal.com probably knows that this headline is going to result in way more shares and way more clicks than if it talked about the student government telling the university that they wanted the university to do something. So, at the end of the day, there are a variety of ways to basically fact-check memes that are out there, images, articles, and see just how true they are. So, probably the most user-friendly example that's out there is a website called Snopes. So, this is what Snopes looks like, and if you click on something like the Hot 50, it will give you examples of some of the things that are spreading across social media right now. So, did COVID-19 kill Chuck Norris? So, the nice thing about Snopes is it'll tell you immediately whether the story is false, and then it'll give you a little bit of information about where did this story first start showing up, and then a little bit more information about why it's true, why it's false, why it's partly true. There's another website called PolitiFact, and this is really useful for a couple of different reasons. It basically says whether something is false, mostly false, a mixture, mostly true, or true. And this applies to news stories, but it can also tell you how truthful political candidates are. So down there at the bottom, if you say all people, so let's say that you wanted to see how true or how truthful Joe Biden is. Okay, so this is basically how it works. It'll tell you of all of the statements that Joe Biden makes, how many are true, how many are mostly true, etc. So this is a great way if you're going to vote really, really quickly, don't have time to do a lot of fact-checking, and you just want to know roughly how honest your politicians are. PolitiFact is a great way to do it. And if you click on 18 checks or 26 checks, it'll tell you about those stories or those claims that that person made that have been analyzed. Now, when you get to factcheck.org, this is where you can get some pretty detailed answers. So PolitiFact and Snopes are good for quick, very easy to understand, yes it's true, no it's not, quick explanation. Factcheck.org, as you can see, gives you a lot more explanation. So if you're really looking to get into the meat of an article or, a story that you saw, FactCheck does a really good job. If you're just looking for a quick answer, Snopes or PolitiFact are both really, really reliable. And the last thing is Real or Satire. If you go to that website, you can plug in the URL or the web address of a source, and it will tell you if it's an actual source or if it's like The Onion and designed to be a joke. Now, the last thing I'll show you is a website called allsides.com. And the reason why I like this, there are two reasons. Number one, if you really want to see what both sides are saying about the same topic, so what the liberals are saying, what the right is saying, and then what articles in the center are saying, this is a great place to go. It's a really awesome way of getting balanced information from all sides. Hence the name. But if you're writing a paper and you've got some sources and you want to check and see, is it a pretty down the road, middle of the road kind of source? Is it really liberal? Is it really conservative? You can click on this thing that says media bias and then see the full list of media bias ratings. And this is pretty much every news source out there. And it will tell you whether it's middle of the road, which is C for center, really liberal, or really conservative. And the farther away from the center you get, the more you can be sure that they're going to be skewing the story either to the right or to the left, selectively interpreting information, or maybe just leaving things out. So I hope this has given you a pretty good understanding of the different kinds of fake news that are out there and how to spot it. So if you have questions, you can always reach out to any of the librarians, and we can be a really good resource as well. And if you'd like to test your own ability to spot fake news, you can always go to these websites and see if you can decide whether or not they're true or not. All right. Good luck.